All right, what's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well. We have another UFC main event challenge video. This time we have Alexander Hernandez taking on Michel Pereira. So let's dive into it. Anthony Hernandez. Okay, I said Alexander. Anthony Hernandez is 12-2. He's 31 years old with a 183 centimeters in height and 191 centimeters in reach. So significantly longer arms than he is tall. Let's compare that to Michel Pereira, who has a much more experienced record, 31-11. He is also 31 years old, 186 centimeters tall and 185 centimeters in reach. So if we compare that, he is 3 centimeters taller than Anthony Hernandez and has 6 centimeters less in reach. So pretty interesting there. Let's just dive into their recent record. Michel Pereira has a lot of fights, but he doesn't have that many fights into the UFC. So he comes into the UFC, fights Danny Roberts, knocks him out in round 1 with a flying knee to a punch. Then he fights Tristan Connolly, completely gasses out in that fight and loses a unanimous decision. Then he fights a really aged Diego Sanchez and gets disqualified due to an illegal knee. Then he fights against Zelim Imadaev and chokes him out in round number 3. That was my first fight watching Michel Pereira, and he looked amazing in that fight. He was just like slapping him all over the place because he got slapped in the face off, so he wanted to get that back. And then in round 3, he just decides to end it, picks him up, slams him, chokes him out with a rear naked choke. Then he fights KS Williams. KS Williams was coming off of a few big knockouts, and this was a really exciting fight. In theory, how it played out was pretty boring, with Michel Pereira kind of resorting to wrestling and his grappling to get the unanimous decision over KS Williams. He fights Nico Price, pretty much controlling the fight the entire time. Fights Andre Fialho, picking him apart. He had to fight it like really safe. Andre Fialho was coming off of a few big knockout wins. Fights Santiago Ponzinibbio, beating him up in the first round, and then Santiago starts to come back as the fight goes on, and Michel Pereira is getting more and more tired. Fights Andre Petroski, punching him and just ground and pounding him in round 1. Mikhail Oleksiejczuk choking him out in round 1. Ihor Potieria choking him out in round 1. So he's coming off of 3 first round knockouts/submissions, and then a string of decisions. So what is his current win streak? His current win streak is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Diego Sanchez was kind of a gimme fight. 9. Tristan Connolly, kind of, he was really stupid. That was a winnable fight. 10, 11. So in the UFC, he's at 11 fights, and he's been pushed for sure, but he's kind of been breezing through a lot of these fights. Even his 2 losses have been fights that he shouldn't have lost against. Let's compare him to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. So Anthony Hernandez gets into the UFC and gets submitted by Marcus Perez. This was in 2019. I'm not going to be putting too much stock into these 2019 and 2020 fights. He fights against Jun Young Park, pretty back and forth round 1, and then he eventually chokes him out in round 2 with an anaconda choke, which is essentially a Darce choke. He fights against Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland throws an elbow to his head and then a knee to the body, which folds him in round 1, and he gets TKO'd there. Then my first fight really watching him was against Adolfo Vieira, and this was kind of his iconic moment where he submits a legendary black belt jiu-jitsu player. But he just tires him out, chokes him out in round 2. Then he fights against Josh Fremd, wins just through wrestling him. Triangle chokes Marc-Andre Barrial in a fight that was just like really back and forth. Beats up Edmund Shabazian. This was Edmund Shabazian's losing to wrestlers era. And then he fights against Roman Kopylov. So a lot of these fights, he's just like on his opponents like a dog on a bone, just kind of wearing on them, and then eventually trying to choke them out in round 3. So one interesting thing to note is Michel Pereira goes to decision usually, or he gets early finishes. Anthony Hernandez sometimes goes to decision, but most of the time he gets late finishes. Round 3, ground and pound. Round 3, triangle choke. Round 2, guillotine choke. Round 2, anaconda choke. So a lot of this is he's wearing his opponents out, whereas Michel Pereira is overwhelming them with his athleticism. So let's just break into some of the footage breakdown here. Michel Pereira, famous for his front and back flipping that he does at the weigh-ins. Super fun to see it. Is a hazard for the ring girls, though. Feel for them. Anthony Hernandez, his most iconic moment, choking out Rodolfo Vieira. Super epic there. And also his little, like, tongue-out throat slash that he does. So let's just, like, break into these guys' games a little bit more. I know that I've already kind of talked about it, but again, super iconic moment from Anthony Hernandez fighting against Rodolfo Vieira here. Rodolfo Vieira basically controls him all round 1. Round 2 comes. Vieira gets this takedown about a minute in. He's hanging on to Hernandez's back, and Hernandez just turns the tables on him. Vieira doesn't really have a gas tank, and Hernandez is able to just outwork him, shuck him off. And this is kind of Hernandez's style. He really likes to outwork the workers. Marc-Andre Barriault prides himself on having a good gas tank. Anthony Hernandez is like, let's see about that. I'll put my gas tank up against yours any day. Takes him down, takes down Roman Kopylov, who's like a legit striker. Just another huge slam takedown on Marc-Andre Barriault right on his head. And then he is submitting these guys. So you have this arm-in guillotine that he has in Rodolfo Vieira. This is essentially a modified Darce choke, this arm-in guillotine. He was going for the Darce, and then he just decides to lean back and go for the guillotine. So that's pretty cool. He has Darce chokes / anaconda chokes and this arm-in guillotine. Basically, the difference is that with his left hand underneath Vieira's neck and arm, if it was a Darce, he would put his left hand on the crook of his elbow, but he's just slid his elbow out to get a better leverage on this point. And then against Marc-Andre Barriault, he chokes him unconscious with this arm triangle. So he has good submission wins and a good, versatile, diverse array of submissions. Rear naked choke on Roman Kopylov, and he gets the win there. So I'm kind of reminded a lot by Bilal Muhammad and Merab, who recently won belts with this same style. We also see him mixing in ground and pound a lot, and he's not just a submission fighter. He can get ground and pound wins too. So ground and pounding Edmen Shahbazyan, mixing in submissions into his grappling, mixing in ground and pound into his grappling as well. So he's a very active fighter. He really is not the cleanest striker in the world, but he uses a lot of these like scramble on the feet situations to just land shots on his opponents. And even though they're not that damaging, like we see Rodolfo Vieira get kicked right in the mouth and he's fine. Like Anthony Hernandez's main tool is going to be exhaustion that he uses against his opponents. Let's compare that to Michel Pereira. So Michel Pereira, again, known for his crazy shenanigans. He's been toning that down, but as I say, he's been toning that down. He literally used it against his opponent, Ihor Potieria. So he's doing this Anthony Pettis superstar kick, or whatever you call it. He's doing backflips in the cage, jumping off the cage, attacking his opponents. This is his flying knee, where he does a flying switch knee, and then rocking his opponent, following it up with this straight right hand that he really uses a lot, which is nice to see. A lot of like high octane, almost WWE style moves that he uses on his opponents. So against this guy, Vadim Aladinov, doesn't matter, he's cut from the UFC. Jumping over the guard, just doing some really fun, crazy acrobatic stuff. What other weapons does he like to use? Well, he uses his push kick a lot, and we see that he does wrestle his opponents, especially when he is tired or feeling like he can get an easier path to victory through the wrestling. Another push kick from him, and then we can see against KS Williams, he does go in for the takedowns, and he rides out rounds on top of his opponents. So that's kind of his thing. He likes to do these really high-octane moves. He likes to keep his opponents at distance. He likes to keep his opponents at distance, really trying to use jabs and long-distance strikes on them and explode into them. We saw against Ihor Potieria, I forgot to get the footage, but he throws the jab, rocking Ihor Potieria, knocking him backwards. Then he flips over him, similar to what he did against Tristan Connolly in this clip here. Flips over him, gets on top, and then starts throwing ground and pound, gets the guillotine, chokes him unconscious with the guillotine. So he's a very fun, flashy fighter, has explosive power. He's kind of like the middleweight Johnny Walker in that regard, but I do think he's better than Johnny Walker. He is able to fight longer. Again, he has a lot of decision wins on his record and decision wins against tough guys like Santiago Ponzinibbio, pretty tough. Andre Fiallo, pretty tough. Nico Price, Chaos Williams, these are all guys that you can't really sneeze at. You can't doubt their quality. Although they are all unranked at middleweight. So there is that. These guys are kind of trying to break into the middleweight rankings. I guess Michel Pereira is number 10 right now. And what is Anthony Hernandez ranked? Number 14. So they're pretty much the exact same in the middleweight rankings. I'd rate them at the kind of the bottom of the middleweight rankings in UFC. So how is Anthony Hernandez going to fare against Michel Pereira? Well, I said before, Michel Pereira has a bunch of round 1 finishes. And if they get out of round 1, he tends to go to decision. So we can see that Ponzinibbio, split decision. Andre Fialho, decision. Nico Price, decision. Chaos Williams, decision. That's 4 decisions in a row. Zalim Imadaev is the exception to the rule where he is able to choke him out in round 3. But I think he was just so much better than Zalim that he was able to kind of play with his food there. Anthony Hernandez does have a history of taking shots, so we can see this in round 1 against Kevin Holland, where Holland lands a nice elbow, kind of stuns him, kind of stuns Hernandez. Hernandez is just standing there, giving Holland the perfect opportunity to land a beautiful knee, which folds Hernandez in half, and from there, it's just elementary to land those ground and pound strikes on him and finishing him off. So you can say that Hernandez has a weakness that lines up with Michel Pereira's strengths. Michel Pereira throws knees. Michel Pereira will throw elbows in the clinch. We can see, we can see this example where he tries to throw a knee on Ponzinibbio, grabbing his head and landing this knee. If Anthony Hernandez is running in to try to grab ground and pound on his opponent, that knee might be there immediately. If his only goal is to try to get into that clinch, then maybe Michel Pereira's knees are going to be there. But we don't really see Michel Pereira thriving too much in the clinch. So let's get into his fight with Ponzinibbio, Santiago Ponzinibbio. So you can see here, this is round 1. Michel Pereira really backs himself up against the cage here. And that's because he doesn't really like engaging in the middle of the octagon with his opponents. He doesn't like engaging with his opponents. He likes dancing around them and blitzing in to land these fight-ending strikes. He has natural power. He has natural explosiveness and athleticism. And you can see his defense. It's better than Johnny Walker's defense. He covers his face up, has a really tight guard here. And Santiago isn't actually able to land any damaging strikes. He does land that right hand, but yeah, he doesn't really land anything. And that's because the threat of Michel Pereira's power is immense, and it makes these guys that are attacking him think twice about it. Oh, well, I've seen him knock people out before with a flying knee or a straight right hand. I might be in trouble here, especially in round 1. But just look at his body language. if he's fighting against a guy whose only goal is to get in on his legs and wear him down in the clinch, this is the perfect opportunity to get onto Michel Pereira's legs and wear him down. Again, a huge right hand. This is in round number 2 against Santiago. This strike is just not going to work against Anthony Hernandez. Anthony Hernandez is not the best at defense in the world, but he is able to avoid a lot of these big strikes from his opponents. And these big overhand swinging strikes that Michel Pereira throws is going to tire himself out. And then we have this knee here. He does throw knees. He's able to throw that knee in this scenario where he lands a knee against this fighter, lands a knee rocking him, and then follows it up with this beautiful straight right hand. That was great. But in the clinch, does Michel Pereira really throw knees that much? In the clinch, his main goal is to get out of the clinch. And then we can see here in round 2, this is just 8 minutes into the fight. There's 2 minutes left of round 2. And he's already a little bit tired. Santiago's kind of overwhelming him with strikes. Michel Pereira has never gone into a 5-round fight, at least in the UFC. And all of his 3-round fights where he doesn't get a finish in the first round, he gets exhausted. This is in round 2. Also, Santiago Ponzinibbio goes in on the legs and gets a takedown on Michel Pereira. Now, if this is Anthony Hernandez in round 2, Hernandez is going to be jumping onto Michel Pereira's back immediately and already hunting for chokes and ground and pound. As it stands, Santiago allows him to get to this position, and then he just runs out the clock with 12 seconds left in the round. And that's round number 2. If it's a 5-round fight, you really have to worry. And then I just wanted to show this sequence where Ponzinibbio lands a leg kick here. A pretty hard leg kick on Michel Pereira. Anthony Hernandez will be throwing leg kicks, and then just 3 jabs. This is in round 3. So again, in a 5-round fight, there would be 2 more rounds. And Michel Pereira is basically a punching bag here, right? Ponzinibbio lands this leg kick, and then 1, 2, 3 jabs, a body shot, and then a left hook to the head, another jab, and then Ponzinibbio goes in for a takedown attempt. And even though Michel Pereira defends this takedown attempt well, he's already exhausted. This is the 3rd round. He's exhausted. And he's allowing himself to get these takedown opportunities so easily. He's allowing himself to let his opponent get in on these takedowns. And this is something that I talked about in the Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili fight, where you can't let your opponent get takedowns on you. You just can't let them get to that opportunity, because that's a losing battle for yourself. You need to be putting this off to the point where they can't even think about getting takedowns on you, especially when you're fighting someone like a Bilal Muhammad, like a Merab, like an Anthony Hernandez. And this is a big reason why Bilal Muhammad beat Leon Edwards, because Leon Edwards lets his opponents get so many takedowns on him, and he prefers to defend the takedowns against the cage rather than stopping his opponents from even thinking about getting the takedown. And then I just want to let these last 10 seconds of the fight play. Remember, this is a 3-round fight where it was striking the entire time. So if Michel Pereira is this exhausted against Santiago Ponzinibbio in a 3-round fight, imagine how tired he's going to be when he's constantly having to defend takedowns. And now I just want to dive into Anthony Hernandez's latest fight against Roman Kopylov. So he goes in and he's really spamming these right hands. And he likes to do this. He likes to spam these right hands and these right kicks. He's kind of corralling his opponent, and then he gets in on the legs. So Kopylov is moving around a lot. He's way more mobile in round number 1 than Michel Pereira was in that 2nd round or even the 3rd round, where Santiago was able to get in on his legs. And you still have Hernandez finding a way to get in on the legs. And then Hernandez, his takedown is actually stuffed. Kopylov actually stuffs his takedown, but it doesn't matter. Hernandez just goes back in on the legs, trying the takedowns again and again and again. And, he's not really doing that much, right? He's not going for submissions, not landing good ground and pound. But he does get his opponent worried about the takedowns. He gets Kopylov. This is as close as he gets to taking Kopylov down in round 1. Kopylov has a 9 out of 9 takedown defense in round 1. But he's landing some ground and pound, and he is tiring his opponent out, and that's the main thing. Hernandez doesn't really care. He's just trying to tire his opponent out. Just look at how much he's trying to just worry at his opponent, like a dog attacking a boar or something. He's just on him constantly. And that's when Santiago is having the most success against Michel Pereira. I really like this little exchange here. This is just perfect at Anthony Hernandez, where he grabs this collar tie and he's throwing uppercuts, 4 uppercuts, and then a takedown. And just look at how crazy this is, right? He's just running with his head down, kind of like a kid charging at someone. And Kopylov gets away from it, but it's this kind of sloppiness that really is Hernandez's friend. And Michel Pereira does not like this kind of sloppiness. That's where the worst is for his fights. And you can see that Hernandez even eats a pretty hard body kick here, but it doesn't matter. He's willing to take damage to put his opponents in this position. He's pressing Kopylov back against the cage so much that when he throws his kick, he literally just falls down because he doesn't realize that the cage is right here. He hits the cage and he falls, and then Hernandez is on him immediately. And Kopylov gets back up. Hernandez goes back on him again and again and again. Eventually, he does get the takedown. And from there, he attacks a choke. Kopylov defends the choke. Hernandez readjusts, gets another choke, and then he gets the tap out. So Hernandez is a dog. He is one of the better aggressive jiu-jitsu players in the game, where he will just constantly be attacking submissions, and he'll constantly be attacking ground and pound and takedowns. So you can talk about how Merab and Bilal Muhammad were able to overwhelm their opponents with takedowns, but Anthony Hernandez will actually follow that up with ground and pound and with submission attempts, both of which he's extremely proficient at using to end fights. And he'll actually get finishes. So in that respect, he is a more entertaining wrestler than both Merab and Bilal Muhammad, although he has been fighting lower competition. So this will be interesting. I think that Michel Pereira and Anthony Hernandez have both fought a relatively equal level of competition. You can say that Michel Pereira's best win might be Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's fought some scrubs like Andre Petroski, Michael Oleksiejczak, Ihor Potieria. Anthony Hernandez has fought some scrubs too, like Marc-Andre Barriault, Edmund Shabazian. But Roman Kopylov is a legit win. So Roman Kopylov is probably a better win than Santiago Ponzinibbio. And they both have interesting games. They both have games where their weaknesses is their opponent's strengths. Michel Pereira has a really good round 1. He has some really explosive shots, which could put Anthony Hernandez out. And Hernandez has been put out before. He's been put out by Kevin Holland's elbow and knee in the clinch, knocking him down. But you also see that Michel Pereira tires out as the fight progresses, and Anthony Hernandez is the best fighter at tiring out his opponents. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a coin flip. They play into each other's games perfectly. It's just whose game will go forward. And I'm pretty confident in saying that if the fight gets out of round 1, Anthony Hernandez is going to win. I've just seen Michel Pereira get much too tired, much too quickly. In the 3-round fights, he gets really exhausted. That string of round 1 finishes is great on paper, but if you look the previous year where he had a string of decisions, he looked pretty weak in those decisions, kind of scraping by them, laying on top of Chaos Williams to try to get the win there. surviving by the skin of his teeth against Santiago Ponzinibbio, losing round 1 on one of the judges' score, or losing round 2 on one of the judges' scorecards, and then losing round 3 on all 3 of them. So you really see Michel Pereira gas out, and I do think that Anthony Hernandez is the kind of guy that's perfectly matched to gas Michel Pereira out. We've seen Michel Pereira fight against grapplers before, like Andre Petroski, pretty decent grappler, knocked him out in round 1. We didn't really see any grappling there. Ihor Potieria, pretty decent grappler, choked him out in round 1. Didn't see any grappling there. I don't think that Michel Pereira is going to be able to knock out or choke out Anthony Hernandez in round 1. We've seen Anthony Hernandez up against some of the best strikers in the division. Roman Kopylov, Edmund Shabazian, both amazing strikers. We've seen him up against some of the best grapplers in the division. Rodolfo Vieira, he had his way with him in round 1. Rodolfo Vieira was on him from pillar to post in round 1. He survives all of that grappling, comes back, chokes him out in round 2. It's going to be hard for Michel Pereira to actually get the finish on Anthony Hernandez. And when we see him go up against guys that are a little bit better than these guys, we do see him struggling to actually knock them out. Like Andre Petroski, he got knocked out when a takedown attempt of his went awry and he hit his opponent's hip. Like that's crazy. He didn't even knock out Nico Price in 2021. Wasn't able to knock out Andre Fialho, wasn't able to knock out Santiago Ponzinibbio. All of these are guys that have been knocked out recently. So even though Michel Pereira is like an extremely explosive, talented fighter, I don't think he has the skills to knock out Anthony Hernandez in round 1 or submit him in round 1. And I do think that as the fight progresses, he might even win round 2 on a lot of the judges' scorecards. But I think round 3 will be extremely close. Round 4, he's going to be super tired. And I think Anthony Hernandez is going to submit him in round 4. So that's my official prediction. I'm going with an Anthony Hernandez win late in the fight or a decision win. But even if he loses those first 3 rounds, I think that a finish win for Hernandez is live in rounds 4 and 5. I just don't think that Michel Pereira is going to be able to put enough damage on Anthony Hernandez to counteract that cardio advantage that Hernandez has. And I haven't looked at the odds. I would be surprised if Michel Pereira is the underdog. Oh, Anthony Hernandez is actually the favorite. Michel Pereira is a plus 114. I would have thought that it's kind of switched just because Michel Pereira has had the more impressive performance, but I can see why people are going with Hernandez. And yeah, that's what I'm going with. Anthony Hernandez late in the fight with a round 4, let's say TKO. I think he'll find that it's more easy to beat on Pereira than it will be to choke him out. Anyway, this should be a really fun fight. We've got some other good fights here. Charles Johnson, Suma Deraji, Rob Font, Kyler Phillips. Jake Hadley's fighting. Darren Elkins is fighting. He's back. Old guy fight. Fun. Oh, Mateus Nicolau. Great. So we got a lot of good flyweight fights and then a pretty hefty middleweight fight in terms of repercussions for the rest of the division. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. Have a great day, and everyone enjoy the fights.